Store butter contains natural flavoring, added colorings, and in some cases preservatives that have no place in real butter. Amish butter contains two ingredients, cream and salt. Here is the complete process Amish families use to turn fresh milk into real butter every single week. Why store butter fails. Walk into any grocery store and pick up a block of butter. Turn it over and read the ingredients. You will find natural flavoring listed after cream. That phrase is a legal term that can mean almost anything. It can mean diacetyl, a synthetic compound added to replicate the taste of real cultured butter. It can mean color additives that make the butter appear more yellow than it naturally is. Commercial butter is made from pasteurized cream, heated to destroy bacteria, which also destroys much of the natural flavor. The Amish have been making real butter for 300 years. They have never needed a single additive to make it taste good. The Amish dairy cow. Everything about Amish butter starts with the cow. Not a feedlot cow eating corn and soy in a concrete pen. A grass-fed dairy cow grazing on fresh grass in summer and high-quality hay in winter. Grass-fed cows produce milk with higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids and beta-carotene than grain-fed cows. Beta-carotene is the natural pigment that makes real butter yellow without added coloring. When you see deep yellow Amish butter, that color is beta-carotene transferred directly from the grass into the milk and then into the butter. Amish farmers know their cows by name. A sick cow produces poor milk. Poor milk produces poor butter. This is why Amish dairy farmers treat their cows as working partners rather than production units. Raw milk and cream rising. After milking, raw milk sits in clean stainless steel cans in the milk house. Raw milk that has not been homogenized behaves differently from store-bought milk. Within a few hours, the cream begins to rise naturally to the surface. By the next morning, a thick layer sits on top. Amish families skim this cream off using a ladle or flat skimmer. The remaining skim milk goes to the pigs or back into the kitchen. Nothing is wasted. The cream collected from several milkings is combined and set aside to culture before churning. Commercial dairies homogenize milk immediately, permanently preventing the cream from ever rising naturally again. Cream separation. In larger Amish dairy operations, a mechanical cream separator speeds up the process. It is a centrifuge device powered by hand crank or small diesel engine that spins milk at high speed. The centrifugal force pushes heavier skim milk outward while lighter cream collects at the center and flows out through a separate spout. A good separator produces cream with a butterfat content of 40% or higher because grass-fed cow milk naturally contains more fat. Commercial butter uses cream at around 36% butterfat. This extra fat is why Amish butter has a richer mouthfeel, better texture, and spreads more smoothly without tearing bread. A quality hand-cranked separator costs between $150 and $400 and lasts for decades. Culturing the cream. Before churning, Amish families culture the cream. This step is what most people making homemade butter skip and what commercial dairies eliminated decades ago in favor of speed. Culturing means allowing the fresh cream to sit at room temperature for 12 to 24 hours. During this time, naturally occurring beneficial bacteria in the raw cream begin to ferment the lactose in the cream, producing lactic acid. This lactic acid is what gives cultured butter its characteristic tang, its depth of flavor, and its complexity that sweet cream butter simply does not have. The temperature during culturing matters. Too warm, and the cream over-ferments and develops off flavors. Too cool, and the bacteria are too slow, and the cream does not develop enough flavor. The ideal culturing temperature is between 65 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Amish kitchens in late spring and fall naturally hover in this range without any temperature control required. In summer, the cream is moved to a cooler spot in the cellar. In winter, it sits near the wood stove at a careful distance. After 12 to 24 hours, the cream thickens slightly and develops a mild, tangy smell. It is now ready for churning. This cultured cream produces butter with a flavor that no commercial product can replicate, regardless of price. The churning process. The cream goes into the churn. Traditional Amish butter churns are wooden barrel churns or glass jar churns with a dasher mechanism. The barrel churn is a wooden cylinder mounted on a frame with a crank handle. Turning the crank rotates the barrel, tumbling the cream inside. The dasher churn is a tall, cylindrical container with a vertical paddle called a dasher that is moved up and down by hand through a hole in the lid. Both methods work on the same principle. Agitating the cream causes the fat molecules to collide and clump together. At first, the cream thickens into whipped cream. Then it begins to look grainy. Then, suddenly, the fat breaks completely away from the liquid and small yellow butter granules appear floating in a white liquid. That white liquid is fresh buttermilk. Real buttermilk, not the cultured product sold in stores. The entire churning process takes between 20 and 45 minutes, depending on the temperature of the cream and the speed of churning. Cream that is too cold takes longer to churn. Cream that is too warm produces soft, greasy butter. The ideal churning temperature is between 60 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Experienced Amish butter makers judge the cream temperature by feel before it ever goes into the churn. Double churning. Most people stop after the first churn. The Amish do not. After the initial churning produces butter granules, the buttermilk is drained off, and the butter granules are returned to the churn for a second round of agitation. This second churning is what sets Amish butter apart from most homemade butter. The first churning separates the butter fat from the buttermilk but leaves microscopic traces of buttermilk trapped inside the butter granules. Buttermilk contains proteins and sugars that cause butter to spoil quickly if not removed completely. The second churning works these remaining buttermilk traces out of the butter, making the final product firmer, smoother, and significantly longer lasting. Double-churned butter pressed together has a denser texture than single-churned butter. It holds its shape better in warm weather. It spreads more evenly without tearing or crumbling. The second churning takes only 10 to 15 additional minutes, but the difference in the final product is substantial. This is why Amish butter lasts weeks in a cool cellar without refrigeration, while single-churned homemade butter begins to taste off within days. The extra effort is not tradition for the sake of tradition. It is a practical technique refined over generations of daily butter making that produces a measurably superior product. Cold water washing. After double churning, the butter is washed. This step is critical and non-negotiable. The butter granules are transferred from the churn into a large wooden bowl or ceramic crock. Cold water, as cold as possible, is poured over the butter. The butter maker uses a wooden paddle or clean hands to press and fold the butter through the cold water. The water turns milky white immediately as it draws out the last traces of buttermilk. That milky water is poured off and replaced with fresh cold water. The pressing and folding continues. Fresh water is added again. This process repeats until the water runs completely clear. Clear water means all the buttermilk has been removed. In practice, this takes 3 to 5 rinses. The cold water serves two purposes simultaneously. It removes the buttermilk that would cause spoilage, and it firms the butter into a workable mass. Warm water would melt the butter into a greasy mess. Cold water keeps the fat solid while drawing out the liquid. Amish women who make butter weekly develop a feel for when the washing is complete. They judge by the clarity of the rinse water and by the texture of the butter under their hands. The butter should feel smooth, dense, and slightly cool. It should hold its shape when pressed, but yield easily without crumbling. Dono sections mean 100 to 100 words, add cardahoon, big pops, salting, and shaping. Once the butter is washed clean, it is ready for salt. Amish butter makers use plain, non-iodized salt. Iodized salt can interfere with the natural flavor of fresh butter. The amount of salt added depends on personal preference and intended use. Butter meant for immediate table use gets less salt. Butter meant for longer storage gets more salt because salt acts as a natural preservative. A typical ratio is 1/4 teaspoon of salt per pound of butter for lightly salted and 1/2 teaspoon per pound for storage butter. The salt is worked into the butter using a wooden paddle or by hand pressing. It must be evenly distributed throughout the entire mass. Uneven salting produces butter that tastes different from bite to bite. After salting, the butter is shaped. Amish families use wooden butter molds carved with simple patterns to press the butter into decorative blocks or rounds. The mold is wetted with cold water before pressing to prevent sticking. The butter is pressed firmly into the mold, excess is scraped away, and the mold is inverted onto parchment paper. The butter releases cleanly, carrying the pattern from the mold on its surface. Some families press butter into simple rectangular blocks using a wooden paddle and straight edges. Others roll it into cylinders wrapped in parchment. The shaping is practical, but also a small point of pride. A well-shaped block of butter presented at the table reflects the care taken in making it. The wooden molds used for shaping are often family heirlooms. A grandmother's mold passed to her daughter carries the same simple pattern that appeared on butter served at that family's table for 3 or 4 generations. The pattern might be a simple flower, a wheat sheaf, or a geometric design. It is never elaborate, but it is always intentional. When that butter appears at a church hosting meal or a community gathering, the pattern identifies whose kitchen made it. It is a small signature on a product made entirely by hand from an animal the family raised themselves. Storage cost and shelf life. Properly made Amish butter stored in a cool cellar or spring house lasts 2 to 4 weeks without refrigeration. Butter that has been double churned and thoroughly washed lasts longer than single churned butter because no residual buttermilk remains to cause spoilage. In a modern refrigerator, properly made Amish butter keeps for 2 to 3 months. Salted butter lasts longer than unsalted because salt inhibits bacterial growth. The cost comparison between homemade Amish butter and store-bought butter is striking. A gallon of fresh whole milk from an Amish dairy costs $2 to $4 and yields approximately 1 cup of cream. 1 cup of cream produces approximately 1/3 to 1/2 pound of butter. A pound of store-bought butter costs $4 to $6 at most grocery stores. A pound of premium European-style cultured butter costs $8 to $12. An Amish family producing butter from their own cows makes it for almost nothing beyond the labor. A family buying raw milk from a neighbor and churning their own butter spends approximately $2 to $3 per pound, including labor. The buttermilk produced as a byproduct of churning is not wasted. It goes into pancakes, biscuits, bread, and cornbread. Every drop of the original milk becomes something useful. The financial case for making butter the Amish way is as strong as the flavor case. Better product, lower cost, 0 additives, 2 ingredients. That is the complete Amish butter equation. What the cost comparison does not capture is the value of knowing exactly what is in the food on your table. An Amish family that makes their own butter knows the cow by name. They know what she ate. They know when the milk was collected. They know every hand that touched the cream from the milk house to the churn to the mold. There are no mystery ingredients. No processing steps that happen in a facility 3 states away. No labels to decipher. Just cream from a known animal, salt from a known source, and the work of known hands producing a product that has sustained families for centuries without a single additive ever being necessary. The complete Amish butter process begins with a grass-fed cow and ends with a shaped block of salted butter sitting on parchment paper in a cool cellar. Every step between those 2 points is simple, deliberate, and refined over generations of daily practice. The cow eats grass. The milk is collected and allowed to separate naturally. The cream is skimmed and cultured for 12 to 24 hours until it develops flavor and tang. It is poured into a churn and agitated until the fat breaks from the liquid. The butter granules are churned a second time to remove trapped buttermilk. The butter is washed in cold water until every trace of buttermilk is gone. Salt is worked in evenly by hand. The butter is pressed into molds and stored in a cool place where it will last for weeks without refrigeration. No additives, no colorings, no natural flavoring that is actually a synthetic compound. No industrial processing that strips the cream of everything that made it taste like something, just cream, salt, time, and the knowledge of how to handle both correctly. The result is a product that costs less than premium store butter, lasts as long, and tastes better than anything sitting in a grocery store dairy case regardless of price. This is why Amish families have never stopped making their own butter, not because they are required to, not because they cannot buy store butter, but because once you have made real butter and tasted what it is supposed to taste like, store butter becomes exactly what it is: a pale imitation of the real thing wrapped in foil and sold at a premium for being ordinary.